Yeah, hi, I'm Allison Lutton from the National Association for the Education of Young Children. And something on my mind, it seems to me over the past 25, 30 years, one of the biggest structural shifts we've seen is younger and younger children coming into the education system. And I haven't heard any comment on that yet, so I'm curious. I know there are just a few
And
minutes left.
you're referring to the increasing universality of preschool, is that?
Yeah, I would say it looks different in different states, but more and more frequently there are 3, 4, 5-year-olds in our school systems in different forms.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes pre-K, sometimes preschool, sometimes Head Start, can take different forms. But my question is, I think that we need to pay attention not just to the fact that that's happening, but that effective teaching strategies are different for very young children. Effective and authentic assessments are different for very young children. And I just haven't heard comment on that. I'd like to hear your comment on what you think about what that means for our school districts, our structures, including school buildings, actually, but especially teacher effectiveness and child assessment.
All right. Let me just inject a fact here which supports your observation. We have a paper called The Other 69%, referring to the fact that it's only in 31% of our classrooms in the public school system that teachers and their students have standardized tests or some kind of routine testing, empirical testing. And the other 69% of teachers, art teachers, preschool teachers, shop teachers, we don't have these measurements. So we're mindful of that, and that's why in the work that I and my colleagues do, and I'm sure on down the table here, we are mindful that you cannot, in a legitimate way, base educator compensation on one measure. It by itself is insufficient, and you run the risk of goal displacement, that one measure distorting the rest of the things you want to happen. So it's got to be multiple measures, and that's particularly true where we don't have teachers with standardized test. Dane, why don't I start with you? Jerry and John have each started before. Is there an observation you would like to make commensurate with this?
Yeah, and actually Adele Robinson at NEYC has raised the very issue with both Jean Wilhoit and I, and so we know that these very same issues have to be addressed in not just the 3, 4, 5 population, which is where most of the young children are being served, but also the birth to 5 programs. If we're really to create to create the system that we don't have in the United States for early childhood. But I think one of the key issues, just to bring it back to the report, is as it relates to that population, is the issue of compensation too, and how compensation plays out in that area, which is why a lot of those individuals leave and go for the big bucks in the K-12 system.
All right, thank you, Dane. John, this will probably be the last word for all of us, so
Okay.
make it in another good word.
Well, I think that teachers of preschool should not be treated any differently than teachers in K-12. They are a very vital part of the system, and quite frankly, a great driver towards student achievement, if we believe all the research. I have had to fight many times to make sure that they weren't taking these standardized tests, and have been victorious on that, and all the research shows that, because I've seen programs where first graders, had to take tests. I can imagine when 3-year-olds that would have to do it. I think that teachers of preschool should be held accountable for their practice. A part of the practice is being able to show evidence of learning. And I would think that within authentic assessments, that preschool teachers should be prepared to be able to do those kinds of assessments and show that evidence of student learning. And that kind of system, I think, is a more meaningful system.
Jerry, a last word, an observation?
CED did a wonderful preparation and another report on this very issue. And they brought in a Nobel laureate in economics to really give them some advice, and it is cost effective. And this achievement gap is really an opportunity gap that you can best close right at the beginning, but you have to have a, again, systemic way of doing it. It takes a quality teacher. You need assessments that are individualized, and you need them to tell a child, the parent, and the teacher something to do differently. If you do that, you can close a lot of the gap. In Montgomery County, that has been one of our anchors, our pre-K through 2. And what we do is we get 4 years, we get 5 years right smack dab in that area. And by the time they get to that 5th year, we've gotten about 90% of them on grade level. And kids can do much more than we think they can. We've just got to adjust our expectations, and we've got to have the will to do it.
Charlie, permit me one last observation, and then we'll turn it back to you and finish. My colleagues here today have identified very genuine difficulties with moving toward a different kind of compensation system. No one would poo-poo the measurement difficulties, the challenges of what the reward structure should look like, all the inequities that could populate it if you're not careful. We could go on, I or any one of us could make a list of 100 challenges that are part of this. I would hate for this endeavor to conclude, however, with the overall feeling that it cannot be done. 20% of America's public school teachers today are being paid on some kind of performance basis in addition to or other than the single salary schedule. And in the last 5 or 6 years, we have really moved it a long way. I don't know of one system, with the possible exception of New York City or Montgomery County, but I don't know one system that's got it absolutely right yet. I just don't. It's just too complicated to get it right all at once. It does take cooperation, we know that, and perseverance. In the long run, Charlie, I think it's also going to take the business community to help us, or it won't happen. Thank you for today.
I want to thank our panel for joining us this afternoon. I want to say that as CED takes this issue around the country with the Gates Foundation, we would like to involve all of you on the panel in one way or another. And Dane will take you up on that offer of partnership with the NGA. We know where to find Jerry and Jim, and also John. I want to salute you and thank you and your leadership. We've enjoyed getting to know you and your senior team, and look forward to continued discussions both in Washington and around the country. And please give our best to Dennis Van Wyckel. Chancellor, thank you again for being with us. Professor Palco, Steve Palco, thank you. And to all of our guests and trustees, we are adjourned, and thank you for being here.